When I was about 10 years old, I lived in a small, sleepy town in northern Indiana called Maplewood. It wasn't much of a city, just a collection of narrow streets, a single grocery store that doubled as a post office, and a park that had seen better days. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, gossip traveled faster than the wind, and kids like me spent long summer days exploring every nook and cranny of the town. My best friend at the time was a boy named Tommy Greer. Tommy was a lanky, freckle-faced kid with an endless curiosity and a knack for getting into trouble. He had this way of making even the most mundane things, like skipping rocks or climbing trees, feel like grand adventures. And on one particular summer day, Tommy came up with what he called the ultimate plan. It all started when we were hanging out at the park near the old willow tree. The park had a small, cracked fountain at its center, and it was surrounded by swings that squeaked when you used them, a rusted merry-go-round, and a big oak bench where old Mr. Jansen liked to sit and feed the birds. Mr. Jansen was one of those quiet, mysterious types. He never said much to anyone, but he was always there, scattering breadcrumbs and sunflower seeds for the sparrows, cardinals, and sometimes even a blue jay or two. That day, as we watched the birds flutter around Mr. Jansen, Tommy suddenly sat up straight. "Let's catch a sparrow," he said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Catch one? What for?" I asked, confused. "I don't know," Tommy shrugged. "Just to see if we can. Maybe we'll keep it as a pet or something. Have you ever seen a sparrow up close? Bet it'd be cool." I wasn't so sure about the idea. Something about it felt wrong, but Tommy had this way of convincing you to go along with his plans, no matter how questionable they seemed. So, before I knew it, we were crouched behind the park's bushes, with Tommy holding an old shoebox he'd found in his garage. We'd sprinkled some breadcrumbs inside the box, propped the lid up with a stick, and tied a piece of string to the stick. The plan was simple. Wait for a bird to hop inside the box, pull the string, and voila, we'd have ourselves a sparrow. It took a while, but eventually, a small brown sparrow ventured close. It chirped and hopped cautiously towards the breadcrumbs, and when it finally stepped inside the box, Tommy yanked the string. The lid fell shut with a soft thud, and just like that, we'd done it. We'd caught a sparrow. Tommy was ecstatic. He picked up the box, grinning from ear to ear, while the bird fluttered frantically inside. I, on the other hand, felt a knot forming in my stomach. "Maybe we should let it go," I said quietly. "Let it go? Are you kidding? We just caught it," Tommy said, clutching the box tightly. "Come on, let's take it to my place. We'll figure out what to do with it there." Reluctantly, I followed him. Tommy's house was only a few blocks away, a small, white clapboard house with a porch swing and a yard that always seemed overgrown. We sneaked inside through the back door, careful not to attract the attention of his mom, who was usually busy baking or watching soap operas. Tommy led the way to his room where he set the shoebox on his desk and poked a few small holes in the lid with a pencil. For the next hour or so, we just stared at the box, listening to the birds' occasional chirps and rustling. Tommy tried to come up with names for it: Flappy, Chirpy, and Captain Sparrow, but the longer we sat there, the more uneasy I felt. The birds' chirps sounded more like cries, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd done something wrong. Eventually, Tommy's mom called us downstairs for dinner, and we left the bird alone in his room. When we came back later that evening, something strange happened. Tommy turned on the light, and the first thing we noticed was that the shoebox was still. No rustling, no chirping, just silence. Tommy hesitated, then slowly lifted the lid. The sparrow was still there, sitting perfectly still in the corner of the box. But there was something odd about it. Its feathers seemed duller, almost as if they'd lost their sheen. and when it hopped to the other side of the box, we noticed something even stranger. It didn't cast a shadow. At first, we thought it was just a trick of the light. Tommy grabbed a flashlight and shone it directly at the bird, but no matter how we angled the beam, the sparrow remained shadowless. That's not normal, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Tommy didn't say anything. For the first time that day, he looked genuinely scared. The next morning, we decided to let the sparrow go. We took the shoebox back to the park, placed it under the old willow tree, and carefully lifted the lid. The bird hesitated for a moment, then hopped out and flew away. As it soared into the sky, I couldn't help but notice that it still didn't cast a shadow. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the sparrow. The guilt of what we'd done weighed heavily on me, and I realized that capturing it had been selfish and cruel. It wasn't ours to keep, and whatever had happened to it, losing its shadow, its vibrancy, was our fault. Tommy and I never spoke about the sparrow again, but the experience stayed with me. It taught me a lesson I'll never forget. Freedom isn't something you can take from another living thing. It's a gift, and it's sacred. Whenever I see a sparrow now, I think back to that summer in Maplewood, to the shadowless bird and the boy I used to be, and I hope that sparrow found its shadow again, wherever it flew.